All right, kiddos, since I'm not there with you, I recorded a little video. You guys are used to it, except this one might be a tad bit longer, just because I want to make sure you guys are good. So as always, you're going to watch. You're going to answer some questions after the video just to kind of talk about it together and make sure you guys are good. But you all have a note packet, so I need you guys to pause, make sure you have your note packet in front of you, and you're taking notes on this as you watch, okay? So go ahead and do that now. But basically today our goal is to be factoring. This is our first little glimpse of factoring, and we've been talking a lot about factor pairs, greatest common factor, so all of those things are going to help us factor using the distributive property. So distributive property is something that is not new to you. We use it a lot, but we're going to review it before we do anything else today, okay? All right, so I would like you guys to try your best to try these two problems, because again, this is old news. You know how to distribute a 2 to everything on the inside of parentheses there, and I'd like you guys to go ahead and try it, okay? So pause me and check back in. All right, so when I distribute that 2, remember I'm multiplying that 2 by everything on the inside, so I'm going to get 6x plus 8, easy peasy. Now, most recently, we talked about using our power rules to distribute. So we are going to have to keep that in mind too today. So I'm going to take that 2x times 3x squared and then 2x times 5. Remember, I'm going to add those exponents. So I'm going to get 6x to the third plus 10x. Okay, so think about the process when you did this. We had to multiply those coefficients and then you added the powers. Today, the reason I had you review that is because we're going in the complete opposite direction today. We're going in reverse. So now you guys are going, oops, didn't mean my eraser. Now we are going to start with a polynomial that looks like this, and your job is to give me an answer that looks like this. So we're going in the complete opposite direction. Okay, so I have a little system, and I'd like you guys to try it. It's kind of like your training reels for your first time factoring here. When I ask you to factor out the GCF, I want you to draw this little thingamabob here. So your GCF is going to go on the outside, and your job is to pull out that GCF and figure out what your leftovers are. You are going to figure out what goes in those parentheses. Okay, again, your answer today is going to look something like this. Okay, so you're pulling out that GCF. So if you're going in the complete opposite direction, before we were multiplying and adding those powers, if we're doing it backwards, we're doing the opposite. So now we're going to be using some division, and we're going to be subtracting our powers instead, okay? So buckle up, friends. It's going to be a great time, okay? Stick with me. We're going to spend a couple days on this, but I want you to take some good notes and see where you're at, okay? So I've got 4 examples we're going to try together. It's quite a process, so make sure you pause it if you need to and kind of talk through it together. So for example number 1, we have 2x plus 6. Your job is to factor that, and you're going to factor it by pulling out the GCF, finding that greatest common factor and factoring it out. So what is my greatest common factor? You might be able to look at those two numbers and know right away, which is awesome. If you don't, remember you can use your factor pairs. So my factors of 2 are 1 times 2. My factors of 6 would be 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. Your job is to look at both lists and figure out what they have in common, the biggest number they have in common. So for these two numbers, it's going to be 2. They don't share an x, so that's not going to be part of our greatest common factor. It's just 2. So we're going to pull out our training wheels. Remember, you're going to figure out what the GCF is, put that on the outside, and then we're going to put the leftovers on the inside, okay? So I have 2 terms here. I'm going to pull the greatest common factor out of both of those terms. So that means what's left over, I should have 2 terms left over too, because I'm pulling it out twice, okay? So there's your training wheels. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the GCF that I just found on the outside. I'm pulling a 2 out of both of those terms, okay? All right, so if I pull a 2 out of 2x, I'm doing division, right? 2 divided by 2 is just 1. Now, I didn't pull an x out, so that's considered a leftover. That x is still chilling. I didn't do anything with it, so I need to pull that down into my leftovers, okay? So if I pull a 2 out of 2x, I'm just left with 1x. I'm done with that term, so I like to cross it out. It makes me feel good, and it's not going to distract me when I pull it out of the next term, okay? So now I'm dealing with 6, positive 6. If I pull a 2 out of 6, Okay, I'm dividing. Okay, I'm going opposite of distributive property. So 6 divided by 2 is going to give me 3. 3 is what's left over. Okay, that is my answer. If you're unsure for the first few times, I would consider checking it. To check it, I'm going to do what I know. Okay, I'm going to distribute that 2. And when I do that, I get 2x plus 6, which is what I started with, okay, before I scribbled it out, okay? All right, so that's a way to check it if you're unsure. Okay, I know you might be confused. That's okay. We're going to do a bunch of examples. Just don't you worry. All right, so next one, 3x plus 18. Now I need to start always by finding my GCF. Okay, so my GCF, again, if you just see it, that's awesome. If not, use your factor pairs. Factors of 3 are 1 times 3. Factors of 18 are 1 times 18, 2 times 9, and 3 times 6. The biggest number on both lists is going to be 3. They do not both have x's. They don't have that in common. So my greatest common factor is just 3. I'm going to put out my training wheels. I'm going to figure out how many terms I have that I got to pull things out of, which is just 2. So I'm going to add that down to my leftovers. Okay, I'm going to pull that 3 out of both of those terms. Okay, my GCF is 3. So if I pull a 3 out of 3x, I'm just left with 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And I didn't pull any x's out, so that's going to be considered a leftover. I'm going to cross it out. Makes me feel good. All right, now I'm going to pull a 3 out of that 18. Opposite of distributive property, remember, is going to be dividing. So what's 18 divided by 3? That's going to give me a 6. Okay, that's it. Okay, you factored out the GCF. All you did was pull a 3 out of all of those terms and figure out what your leftovers were. All right, let's get a little bit more challenging down here, but same steps. Let's find that GCF. Now what I'm noticing straight off the bat is they do both have x's, so I have to consider that into my GCF. Okay, factors of 3 are 1 times 3. I've already done factors of 6, so I'm good. Now let's talk about those x's. They both have at least how many x's? I know that my greatest common factor is 3, but they also share an x. Okay, they both have at least one x. So my greatest common factor this time is 3x. I'm going to punch in my training wheels, okay? And then I'm going to figure out I have 2 terms. Okay, so I'm going to put that in my little training wheels here. All right. This time I'm pulling a 3x out of both of those terms. Okay, so if I pull a 3x out of 3x squared, 3 divided by 3 is 1. I had 2 x's and I pulled 1 out, so that means I have 1 that's left over. Okay, now I'm going to cross it out. I'm going to pull a 3x out of that 6x. When I do that, I did 6 divided by 3 was 2, and I already had pulled that x out, so I didn't have any left over. So that is my factored answer. Okay, last one, GCF. For time's sake, I'm going to kind of talk you through it. Hopefully when you get better at this, you're going to be able to look at those numbers and determine what do they have in common. The biggest number I can divide by 6 and 4 would be 2. And look at the x's. They both have x's and they both have at least 1, but they do not both have a y. So my greatest common factor is just 2x. I'm going to plug in my little strategy here. I have 2 terms, all right? So I'm going to plug in my 2x. I'm going to pull a 2x out of everything. So if I pull a 2x out of 6x squared, I'm going to do 6 divided by 2 gives me 3. I had 2 x's. I pulled 1 out, so I have 1 left. Okay, I could do 2 minus 1 is just 1. Then I'm going to look to the next term. If I do 4 divided by 2 gives me 2. I already pulled the x out, so I don't have any x's as a leftover, but I do have that y just chilling. Okay, just to show you one more time, I can check this just using regular distributive property. So 2x times 3x gives me 6x squared. 2x times 2y gives me 4xy. And that is what I started with, and I know I'm good. Okay, so if you're feeling uncertain, you can always use distributive property to check it. All right, kiddos, it's a doozy. We're going to do tons of practice. You're going to do a little bit of practice together today, and we'll talk a lot about this tomorrow. Go back and make sure you answer those questions in the Canvas quiz, and then make sure you write down any questions you have for me, and we'll go through them tomorrow. See you later.